A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Spectrum Extra, live on Radio 1 FM 90. On a day like this, we review the major events of the week. But today, we'll be doing a special edition on the current bill, the Protection of National Sovereignty Bill 2026. Well, the Ugandan Parliament has officially begun receiving views from different stakeholders about that particular bill. The committees assigned with the task of scrutinizing the bill include the Defense and Internal Affairs Committee, plus the Legal and Parliamentary Affairs Committee's joint committee. They began by meeting the Attorney General, who are the drafters of this bill. They defended the bill as critical in addressing the loopholes that exist in the current legal frameworks that they say did not envisage emerging issues such as foreign influence. Now, the bill, among other things, seeks to regulate foreign funding and influence, targeting what it describes as agents of foreigners with a strict registration, potential 20-year jail term, and up to shillings 2 billion fines, or both. It also defines a Ugandan living in the diaspora as a foreigner, and there's a requirement of prior ministerial approval for any funding of shillings 400 million from abroad. So there's been a big discussion going on about this particular issue. Organizations who think they are affected, including those in civil society. We've seen churches, private citizens, raising issues from across the country. Now, today, some of those key stakeholders were before this particular committee where they presented their views. Some demanded that the bill be withdrawn because it contravenes the Constitution, on top of proposing punitive and unnecessary restrictions to all manner of citizenry. So, over the next 2 hours, we will be discussing this issue with some of the stakeholders who were before these committees, but also, hearing from you, the listener, about this particular bill. We want to understand if this country actually needs this kind of legislation. It's upon that point that I will urge you to contribute to this discussion using the WhatsApp line 0703 090 090. My name is Kenneth Anderson Lukwago, your host, and this is the panel to review this particular issue. Dr. Anthony Obuku Ekwaro, physician and health sector policy specialist. Good evening, sir. Thank you so much for turning up Spectrum Extra. You've been away for quite some time.
Good evening, listeners, and happy birthday, Dr. Kiza Besije.
Also in studio, Mr. Simon Ssenyonga, lawyer and director, International Center for Religious Advocacy and Development. Good evening. It's a pleasure having you on Spectrum Extra.
I think I've been away longest.
Hey.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Also in studio, Mr. Marvin, Saasi, Secretary for Diaspora Affairs and member of the National Unity Platform legal team. Good evening. Thank you so much for coming to Spectrum Extra.
Good evening, Anderson. Good evening, our listeners. And my two friends have never been here since my first time.
You're making the maiden appearance.
Yes, yeah.
Also in studio is a veteran of this platform, retired Major Pollar Awich, Director of External Affairs, NRM Secretariat. He's a lawyer and a human rights defender. Good evening, retired Major Pollar. It's a pleasure having you on Spectrum Extra.
Good evening and greetings to my colleagues and greetings to our viewers.
All right. From this panel, you can see we have somebody who specializes in the health sector. We have somebody from the religious institutions and two politicians. The politicians have been complaining that this law is targeting them. So I have two politicians here. The health sector says it's equally affected. And also the religious leaders, who are also part of the wider civil society, are also affected. Me, I represent the media, which also has a particular clause in that bill, which is about publishing information that could be prejudicial to the state of Uganda, or which can affect, the economy, the well-being of this country, and also the media is tagged in that particular bill. So this bill affects almost everybody in this particular country, including those who are outside. Our colleagues who have decided to go and work abroad.
Even those who are writing the bill. Tomorrow when government changes, they will feel the pinch of it.
All right. And I want to begin with you, Dr. Obuku. You've been following the discussion, but also looking at how this bill is likely to affect the health sector, where you are a policy specialist. Let's begin by hearing from you the general picture, the general,
outlook
from even speaking to your colleagues.
Foremost, before I move very far, let me, on behalf of many doctors, it is important that I send my condolences to the family of Honorable Helen Nachmuli, who passed away. It was a sad week for all of us because that particular hospital is a high-quality hospital. The doctor is highly qualified, and we are still puzzled. But the Uganda Medical and Dental Practitioner Council is very capable under Professor Joel Okulu, and we are waiting for that verdict. I thought I should clear that and move ahead. What is sovereignty? We also have a principle. Let me go ahead.
Maybe before you even leave that matter, maybe we should dig a little bit better. I'm sure you've heard the public sentiments, people demanding for the details. And there's an ongoing debate even on social media, whether it's right for the hospital to divulge the details, even this charged political environment.
And that is where I was coming.
Do you think people have a right
to information?
To know
yes,
what happened?
But in a limited way. You know, this sovereignty, we are in a way that is sovereignty
of the hospital.
The patient has sovereignty. We call it autonomy, respect of persons. The patient should decide where they want to seek care, which care they want to seek, and by which doctor. And not a which doctor, but which doctor is going to give them who, which type of doctor is going to give them. And also they have autonomy or the right to decline. But also there are 4 principles of medical care. I've mentioned one. The other one is under respect of persons, by the way, is I think confidentiality. Yeah? Confidentiality and privacy. And the medical ethics teaches not to disclose information except to the patient and other affected persons with permission of the patient, except where it is a public health threat.
But
so if it is not a public health threat,
now there's no
patient. No. The patient has next of kin, a child, a mother perhaps, and whoever else she included in her documents when she was signing. The sister who took her. Those ones, I think when I understand the Minister of Health has already commissioned the Uganda Medical and Dental Practitioners Council, which is an arm of government, that polices us, doctors. It's a professional court. And they are investigating under Professor Joel Okulu, very competent, very ethical, highly qualified. The British trained doctors of those days. He's the one in charge of that case. He's a professor of Okulu Dome. In charge, he was a professor at Mackay University. He's retired, he's in his 70s. So really, we are going to expect a very good report. But even then, I just needed to mention that while we attempt to treat, some of these things are in the arms of God. At times you do everything, and there is something we call idiosyncrasy. Idiosyncrasy means nobody knows. Nobody knows. Sometimes you come with an illness and nobody knows. And you improve with it without the doctor's injection or anything. At times you go for operation, something happens. Maybe it is one of those rare conditions in the population which we are unable to look out for commonly. Because we follow epidemiology.
All right.
But at the end of the day, we are really condoling with the family. No surgeon wakes up and establishes a private clinic to do otherwise, other than heal you, and I'm sure that particular facility, Alexandria, and the doctor have done a great job. I didn't want to make this a lecture on fibroids. I saw a full-page article in the New Vision. People have been talking about it, and I don't need to add, because I'm no expert in it.
All right. But from your expertise in this kind of investigation, what do you think they look out for?
Of course, they look out for professional negligence. They look out for malpractice. Okay? And they look out for any flaws in the process. And such a team is constituted of experts, including, for example, an anesthesiologist. Anesthesiologist is a person who makes you sleep before surgery. Perhaps a surgeon or an obstetrician in this case. Professor Kulu himself, the chair of the council, very, very competent, is a physiologist, how the body works. But also they may want to get views of the life history, or the medical history, or the surgical history of the patient, what state she was in, and so on. So they look at all these technicalities and try to come up with a verdict, and it has the powers of the magistrate's court, and either sanction or exonerate the facility and the doctor.
All right. So we wait for that process to be concluded.
Yes.
All right. Let's go.
But we pray for healing of the family. This is the most important, because whatever the verdict is, really, I want to say that there is no doctor who goes out there to work on that outcome, but it can happen.
Indeed.
Actually, for me, it happened to me when I was in Arua, and that was the last time I operated a mother. It was the last. I said, this thing. Mother walked in very well. We were 2 or 3, worked on her, but she came out well. In the morning, we came back, and we were told, something happened. But she came out of theater well and so on. So that was in 2003.
Okay.
When I was doing internship. I saw it. We were 3 surgeons. So you can't really say that there was no surgeon. Everything was there. And the mother, it was, I think, her 8th pregnancy. So she had delivered 7 successfully. Then the 8th, through cesarean section, problem. So it happens, and it's, for me, that ended my career in theater. That's why my theater now is this political one, advocacy, and so on.
All right. Let's now go to the thematic area of this particular bill that we're looking at. From the side of the health sector, what are your observations about this bill?
So when we saw this bill, we called for a consensus meeting, a stakeholder meeting. And we came up with a position paper, which we submitted to Parliament. When I say we, I'm one of the many doctors who attended, over 300 attended, with some lawyers there to give us guidance. Dr. Sarah Virete was there. Mr. Philip Bierugawa, senior counsel, was there. We had the Radical New Bar president in exile. He was there, Semakade, and many others. Okay? And we deliberated on this. And the Uganda Medical Association leadership, of which I'm not part anymore, but they co-opted me in the committee, came up with a position paper which they sent in there. Quickly, what will this bill do to the health sector? Remember the spirit. For us, we are looking at the spirit of the bill. It is being rushed. Okay? It has not been called for. We don't know what is so urgent. So as citizens, even because we are first citizens, we are questioning the spirit of this bill. It is, for me, in 2017, I was invited by the president to give a comment on the age limit bill. It is the same spirit. It was rushed. We even doubt whether they read our it's like in the policy studies we call it using evidence after the fact. It is called symbolic use of evidence. Even if you research, even if you give views, evidence from the population, they use it tactfully. They say, we consulted, but they have already made a decision. But what are the areas which might be affected? I can guarantee you, the health sector budget. If you attend the annual joint review mission or the National Health Assembly, which takes place every year, Ministry of Health, development partners, districts, and so on, NGOs, you realize that at least 40% of our budget of the health sector is funded by the partner. Now, if you include off budget, it can go up to over 50% off budget. Meaning, I come to you, Mr. Lukwago, you have an NGO in Masindi there providing HIV counseling services. I fund you direct without necessarily going to Ministry of Health. Off budget can be another over 10, 20, 30%. I don't know the figures. Okay? So, you who is contributing greatly, because government does not reach everywhere. Even powerful governments like the United States of America, they contract out certain health services to the private sector. If you add the private sector plus the donors, you could easily find that over 60% of the budget is by the donors and the private sector. How will the health sector be affected? Research and innovation will die with this. Already, by the way, there are stringent measures of this money coming in. Our research and innovation, until COVID, when Mr. Museveni did a very good thing to start this STI fund, COVID vaccine and so on, and they are moving by the much as people are focusing on the rats, but I am aware they are moving on other aspects. That was the greatest achievement Mr. Museveni did for R&D, but he should put more money there. Instead of taking this money to day farmer, coffee, blah, 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 that money is being wasted. They should bring it to proper scientists at Makerere and these other universities. So that will be affected because the majority of that money anyway comes from abroad. And it is not $100,000. $100,000 is the smallest grant for a PhD student to do his research in the lab. And that is the limit, $400 million, isn't it? $107,000. people get $10 million. So, you see what I mean? And then you are going to punish them if they get it without the express approval of them. So this bill may not be implementable. When it comes to emergency response, I can guarantee you the bulk of the budget. One Ebola outbreak in Congo cost $25 million. And you know, by the time government rallies that money, they have other priorities. So who comes in? Donors. And who are the players? Non-state actors. Okay? Ministry is there as a coordination and policy body, but the non-state actors go down there and they have to be paid allowances and they have to quickly turn around this outbreak. Within 7 days, you want to turn around. This is the 717 matrix that we use on metric. Within 7 days, you should have detected it's an outbreak. 1 day reported. The next 7 days, early response to make sure it does not become a public health concern. And then the other thing, of course, is what is likely to be affected is professional practice. There are existing laws which will be affected. The National Drug Authority Act, the NMS Act to import meats, the National Medical and Dental Practitioner Councils Act. All those are going to be affected, and they may need to be repealed for this bill to take effect. Why? The UMDPC registers foreign doctors. They are always coming here to do camps, by the way. You know, eye camps, free eye camps. Ugandan doctors. I have my colleague, my classmate, Professor Dr. Mugisha Ondoma. He's a neurosurgeon in Iowa. This is, northwest USA. He comes every year or every other year to do surgeries. He comes with equipment to donate. He comes with the materials to use. It is going to create a bureaucratic bottleneck for him to come because they need so many levels of approval. All right. There is also a conflict of medical ethics that we will find, especially issues to do with the what we call telemedicine. You know, now surgery can be done from India while you are here. You know that? Telemedicine. The surgeon can be in India and giving you directions here. Yeah. Working together, collaboration. He's a foreigner. You are there for his agent. Will we need permission from every patient who needs to be operated here? You see what I mean? So it will even it will strangulate service delivery. But before I conclude, let me say this quickly. The medical fraternity finds this bill constitutionally problematic in the following respects. One, it is inconsistent with the right to life, especially Article 22, due to foreseeable service delivery disruptions. It violates the freedom of profession in Article 40 by restricting licensed medical practice based on funding sources. It introduces disproportionate penalties. It will criminalize doctors for reporting drug shortages. You know, the Uganda Medical Association, for example, we are advocates for the patient as well as the doctor. This bill says that once you go and hold a press conference and say we are having challenges in Mulago, the drugs are not enough, this law can catch you. And therefore, we are saying it should not even be modified because the existing laws which are listed, the lawyers have also said they are the existing laws, you know, the Money Laundering Act, the BOU Act and others. But for us, we also say we have the Medical and Dental Practitioners Act, we have the National Drug Authority Act, we have the NMS Act, which are governing this sector. What mischief are they going to cure other than making it more complicated? We are moving into a world where there should be less government. You know what I mean? But we are increasingly seeing, if you look at the Freedom House Index, the world is becoming more authoritarian. Even in the beacon of democracy and liberty in the USA, you say something about Israel, arrested. In the UK, people are telling us about democracy, you get, and elections and so on. You say something about Israel? So the world is becoming more authoritarian all over. And African governments are also taking advantage of the authoritarians far north to increase this authoritarianism. I suspect, now from as a Ugandan, I suspect that this bill here is a preparation for other things coming.
All right.
And therefore, they have to introduce this law, okay,
Mm.
to prepare for political work ahead. Happy birthday, Dr. Kizza Besigye.
Spectra Bakes on Radio 1 FM 90. I don't know why you continue to mention Dr. Kizza Besigye when I know actually your party leader is Jimmy Akena. But let's go for a break. When we return, we still have other stakeholders on the table who are going to share their thoughts about this particular bill. Now, stay tuned, Radio 1 FM 90, but keep your comments coming by the WhatsApp line 0703 090 090. Spectrum Extra continues after this break. Well, thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum Extra live on Radio 1 FM 90. Our special focus on the national protection of national sovereignty bill, which is now before Parliament. The relevant committees began receiving views from different stakeholders. They started with the Attorney General yesterday. Today, a number of stakeholders were before that committee to present their views. And a majority of them are saying they should withdraw this bill. Is it a possibility? So I have some key stakeholders here in studio. Dr. Anthony Obuku Ekwaro, physician and health sector policy analyst, specialist. He has just presented the case of the medical profession. We also have in studio Mr. Marvin Saasi, Secretary for Diaspora Affairs and member of the National Unity Platform legal team. Retired Major Pollar Awich, Director of External Affairs, NRM Secretariat, lawyer and human rights defenders. Those two, we were just joking that if this bill is passed in this current form, they will be in charge of foreigners. Because they are all in charge of external affairs, diaspora and external affairs. So
Might be the one to write the register.
we want to hear now the views of somebody who has a background of the religious institutions. That is Simon Ssenyonga, who is a lawyer and director, International Center for Religious Advocacy and Development. Mr. Ssenyonga, tell us what's the feeling of the institutions from which you belong about this particular bill? What is their take on the provisions in this particular bill?
I'll begin by saying that the general feel is that the sovereignty bill, as is, reawakens memories of something that we have contended with for some significant time. That is the religious policy, and we've had extensive discussions around it. And what is at the center of the religious policy in relation to the sovereignty bill? The essence of the freedom of worship under Article 29 of the Ugandan Constitution, and even under international practice, it is to establish a connection between humanity and a sovereign being in whatever form, shape, or kind you may want to call it, whether Anglican, Muslim, Pentecostal, whatsoever case it is. And that is why this is of specific interest to us, the question of sovereignty. Because sovereignty is the essence of your relationship with the supernatural being. What is the bill doing, right? What is this current bill doing? It is redefining sovereignty in the Ugandan context. And what do I mean? It is establishing a new sovereign. Dr. Obuku has talked about how the world is moving away from big government. And now what we are having right now is the establishment of big government, where the Minister of Internal Affairs, and please note this, a political appointee of the sitting president, will be the one to have a final say in terms of the exercise of your fundamental human right, the freedom of worship. Under the current bill, there is going to be an establishment of a Department of Peace and Security, which is going to have an extensive obligation in terms of approving different processes which pertain to the very existence and the very manifestation of your fundamental human right. And shortly, I want to take you through some of the problematic clauses, but let me just give you context to this. Many Ugandans do not appreciate the essence of the freedom of worship. Unlike very many other rights, the freedom of worship has been strictly limited around religious leaders. But never forget that the last population census that we had, 85% of Ugandans ascribe to a particular faith or religion. That is point number one to note. So these are a very big population that you cannot ignore. And that is why somebody cannot convince me that the freedom of worship is only limited to religious leaders. Everybody is still on this table. You subscribe in one way or the other to a particular faith. And that is why the freedom of worship is very important and fundamental to this conversation. Because as a matter of fact, it represents the majority population of Uganda. Almost everyone. So
even those who are not listed do believe in witchcraft. That is also their spiritual life.
And again, in essence, what you're saying is that the freedom of worship does not exist as a standalone right. It exists in relation with other attendant rights. For example, when you read the provisions of Article 29, it talks about the freedom of religion or the freedom of worship. It talks about freedom of association, freedom of expression. So in touching the freedom of worship, you are in essence touching other attendant rights. And I want to bring it home now here.
I want you to point to us how this bill contravenes your freedom of worship.
Exactly. I will begin from the point that the spirit of, and I've made this argument, that the spirit of the law is more important than the law itself. So before you interrogate the clauses of any law, always first look at the spirit of the law. Let me give you a reference here. When you read the ministerial statement, thank God we have Major Awich Pollar here, who was in Chankwanzi the other day. The ministerial statement that was read and presented to the members of the NRM caucus, there was a very problematic statement I found, that they said the spirit or the inspiration of this law, in terms of reference points, they quoted the Agaciro system of Rwanda, which in essence seeks to restore the dignity of the Rwandese. The issue is not the restoration of the dignity. The question is that if you're making any cross-reference in terms of inspiration for systems that are going to shape the legislative process, you must be extremely keen that you have a metric of measurement whether whatever system you're referring to protects this fundamental right. When you take me to Rwanda, what is its success story concerning the protection of the freedom of worship? Because if it is your first point of reference, then I want to go back and interrogate that how has Rwanda performed against the metric of protection of freedom of worship? I am talking about the spirit of the law. The second country of reference is Russia, where they have a foreign agents law. But I just want to give you again what has happened in Russia. In 2016, the Memorial International, which is a leading human rights group, was closed, was liquidated under the foreign agents law. Now Uganda is taking reference from that as its best example. Levada Center, which is a leading independent polling agency, was also closed. It was barred from engaging in election-related research. Now remember, Uganda is speaking reference from that. BBC journalists in Russia were banned and they were labeled foreign agents. One of the prominent filmmakers called Pavel Telavinka, an Oscar award-winning producer, was banned from producing films. I am giving you reference to Russia to show you that if we are quoting Russia, how has Russia performed against the metric of the realization of freedom of worship if you want to apply this law? Now, yesterday you had the Attorney General, the Honorable Chiweyoga Chwanika, quoting extensively the FARA law from the USA. It has been amended 10 times ever since it was enacted. And they have quoted other laws, other countries where they're picking reference from. Think about Hungary, which right now has been labeled by the EU as one of the worst practicing human rights countries. They are quoting Nicaragua as one of the countries. In the African context, I've talked about Rwanda, but also there is Zimbabwe. So those countries I've made reference to are addressing the spirit of the law, which informed the mind of the minister who brought this specific bill. So we are saying there is no standard metric that we can look at for us to pick inspiration in relation to the freedom of worship. When you look at the specific clauses, first of all, there is a broad definition of the broad definition of, for example, foreign agents. It is hard for you to point a finger to who a foreign agent is. Why? The mind of the drafters of the law seeks to criminalize, but also sow suspicion upon arrival that as long as you're outside Uganda, you are suspect to committing crime. Now, majority of the religious institutions are fully the nature of religious expression and manifestation is literally cross-border because there is dependence on partnerships and outside engagements. Don't forget this, Anderson and colleagues, that 30 to 40% of the health system and the education system of Uganda is majorly funded by religious institutions.
Founder bodies.
Yes.
Founder bodies.
Now, if you want to curtail such a big contribution, yet in terms of your own government-run institutions, you have a challenge, then that is a big problem to the religious institutions. Number two, the question of being a foreigner labels, it creates a sense of condescending language, because the people who are practicing and contributing to the very development of Uganda, people who are bringing in over 1.5 billion US dollars in forms of foreign direct investment, many of whom are actually believers and channel their work through their religious institutions. Why? Because religion and faith are forms of inspiration in terms of activity. Now, when you criminalize and use condescending language, which demotivates, that is a major challenge to the realization of the freedom of worship. Because many people think the freedom of worship is going to church and you sing and you praise. It's bigger than that. It has the intrinsic part, but also the manifestation. And the bill itself does not only curtail the intrinsic sense of the freedom of worship, but the full manifestation of that freedom. Now, they're talking about under clause 5 of the bill, prohibition of promoting interests of a foreigner. We already have problems with how a foreigner is defined. Now we're talking about the interests of a foreigner. Number one, the law is extremely wide in defining what interests are of a foreigner. It's simply cast on the whims of the Minister of Internal Affairs. Now I've just told you that the Minister of Internal Affairs is going to be the new sovereign. It's going to be the new God. Number two, there is a Department of Peace and Security which is going to scrutinize. It has no time limit as to when it can issue you a certificate or give you feedback when you make an application. For example, you want to bring in resources. Now, when you tell me that it's going to define the interests of a foreigner, in our current context where we have had, and this is not even me quoting the contemporary politics, if you read the preamble of our constitution, very well knowing our history, which has been filled and tainted with political persecution, but even if you try to the contemporary challenges, you can tell that it is really the person who will be in office that will determine the end game. We talk about the prior approval, clause 6, 7, and 8.
As you wind up.
Yes. It talks about the prior approval for provision of services. And they're saying that the Ministry of Internal Affairs must be the one to approve specific services that are to be offered, especially those which are perceived to be, which make you an agent of a foreigner. No time limit as to when the ministry will respond. There is no right of appeal. If the ministry says that
no,
we have said no, we can't allow you to have 400 million this year. You will never appeal that process. You will never have a time limit.
Don't you think some of those things will be captured in the regulations, maybe, to operationalize the law?
But you see, the thing is that the current provisions of the bill as it is lack a very fundamental element of legislative drafting. Right. And that is called, let me just finish this because it's very core. That is called the provisions of transition. As soon as this law, if it is enacted today, it will begin operating today. But under best practice of legislative drafting, it is important that you have transitional clauses. And you say that after we have enacted the law, let us give it 6 months, because you're causing a major economic shakeup.
All right. People
have to go and register at the ministry. They have to get responses. But for you're saying, as soon as, right now as we speak, as soon as the law comes to pass, you, Anderson, under the provision of economic sabotage, you can't make certain statements. A religious leader who will be perceived to speak a statement that is against the regime, again, that broad language, already, because of lack of transitional provisions, the medics have told you, as soon as the law comes to pass, it will be implemented.
We can't complain that there are no medicines.
All right. Let's now go to Saasi. Saasi, let's hear from you. You come from the National Unity Platform. You are among the people who appeared before that committee, but also the leader of opposition was there to articulate some of the issues. When you sit down as a politician, as somebody who comes from a political institution, what are your concerns about this particular bill as NUP?
I don't know where to begin from, but first I think my first and greatest concern around this bill and the discussion that has ensued since it was introduced on the floor of Parliament is the constant realization that the population, either knowingly or unknowingly, keeps, and this is a mistake that even us who should know better tend to make every now and then. The population keeps giving this regime what I call a benefit of doubt, that it has consistently proven over time that, one, it does not deserve, and that, two, every time you give it that benefit of doubt, you will live to regret it. Why am I saying that? We can discuss the implications of this bill from the first clause to the last clause, from morning to evening. We can talk about the law, we can talk about the legal provisions, we can talk about what the Constitution says. You know, we can say all that. But in doing that, in engaging in what I will unfortunately call, in engaging in that exercise in futility, or maybe a purely academic exercise that might have no tangible result in the long run, then we lose sight of the reality that is before us. When the regime was making or generating this bill, it's not that it was not aware of the implications of this bill on the various aspects of Ugandan society. What it was aware of, in my view, and given what I've seen ever since I started paying closer attention to what goes on in this country, the regime knows what it's doing. That's number one. The regime understands what the implications of this bill on the legal profession are. It understands the implications of this bill on the banking industry. It understands the implication on this bill on virtually every and any sector you can imagine. The truth simply does not care, because for as long as the bill serves the regime's ultimate interest, that is, retaining power and vanquishing real and perceived political opponents, the rest does not matter. In the calculation of the regime, whatever price the regime has to pay because of the passing of this bill is worth it if that price helps it achieve its main objective.
How does that bill achieve that main objective that you've just stated there?
First of all, the other mistake I wanted to talk about, so that I can maybe loop in with what you've asked, is this. The bill was not made with the general average ordinary Ugandan or the general Ugandan population and society in mind. The regime we are dealing with has never had such a broad view of country when it comes to critical things, including its remaining in power. The bill was made with a narrow-minded view and target of further restricting the space within which its opponents may be able to operate. And those opponents certainly include the political opposition. They also, to a large extent, include the civil society. They include such people as investigative journalists. Like, they include many and different categories of people. The bill primarily targets those categories of society that it thinks would pose a challenge to its grip on power. So if you asked me, Marvin, what my honest views are, when you ask me what the regime's intention is with the bill, my views are this. The bill seeks to achieve what the amendment to the Political Parties and Organizations Act enacted in 2025 failed to achieve. What that amendment achieved was that it took away all the money the party called the National Unity Platform, and its president, had been receiving from the Electoral Commission by operation of that law. The Political Parties and Organizations Act has had a provision that provided for all political parties represented in Parliament receiving a percentage of the money the regime collects on behalf of the population. So, and in Mr. Museveni's calculation, a financially well-oiled opponent is always going to be hard to deal with. So how do we cripple him? So they brought that amendment, championed by Mr. Norbert Mao, and they managed to cut off the statutory disbursements that the National Unity Platform had been getting. Do not forget that this money was cut off just before the election. And in their calculation, once the party did not have that money, then it would become extremely hard for its presidential candidate to challenge Mr. Museveni. In bringing that amendment, what the regime had not factored in was the willingness of the ordinary Ugandan to contribute to this cause, with or without money from the Electoral Commission by operation of the law. So when they cut off the money, the National Unity Platform launched an international fundraising drive. And that fundraising drive, to a large extent, supported the campaign of President Kyagulanyi, and most importantly, the activities of the National Unity Platform. Because the money it had been getting from the Electoral Commission under the law was meant to achieve two things. One, facilitate the party's participation in electoral activities, and then number two, facilitate the party's day-to-day operations. So when they cut it off, they expected the party to collapse and the candidature of its presidential candidate to equally collapse. So when the party launched a fundraising drive, the population responded in a way that shocked perhaps even the National Unity Platform and the regime. The regime had underestimated the determination of Ugandans here and abroad to support the person they believe has their closest interests at heart. And so a large portion of that money was sent over by our chapters in the diaspora. And now the regime has brought the sovereignty, what it calls the protection of sovereignty bill, to now cut off what it considers to be the remaining financial arm of its main opponent. That is why, among other things, that the bill targets. The bill says to fundraise, of course I'm just paraphrasing, the bill says to fundraise or to raise money from a foreigner to support your engagement in political activities here. That's a criminal. The bill does not stop there. The bill effectively categorizes the president of the National Unity Platform and Mr. Museveni's main opponent as a foreigner. And in characterizing him as a foreigner, it makes it criminal for that same gentleman to continue running the National Unity Platform, because the bill stops a foreigner from meddling in the affairs, in the political affairs of Uganda. It also criminalizes support for his supporters here. So go to the street, hold a placard, and say, me, I support Kyagulanyi and People Power. We have the bill which says, before you can say that, you need authorization of the minister, because supporting a foreigner politically is now a crime.
Why do you describe Kyagulanyi as a foreigner?
The bill, in its definition of a foreigner, under clause 1, defines a foreigner to include a Ugandan citizen resident outside the country. It does not specify resident for how long and for what purpose.
But we are told Kyagulanyi is coming back very soon.
He's outside in the meantime. He's outside in the meantime.
So he falls in the
Of course, I could stretch the argument and say that maybe they're also trying to force him back so that then they can do the very worst. But I didn't want to go there. So the bill thinks it will finally, or the regime thinks with this bill it has finally found a way to deal with the opposition and with its main opponent in the person of President Kyagulanyi Ssentamu Robert. Most importantly and most worryingly, the bill as it is, when you read its various clauses, effectively criminalizes opposition to the Museveni regime. Whether you are NUP, whether you are FDC, PFF, because if the bill says to express a political opinion which might be backed by a foreigner, you need the approval of the minister. To challenge the policy or proposed policies of government, you need to either seek the permission of a foreigner or you write to the minister your views. You don't post them on social media. If the bill says we are capping the maximum amount of money you can receive from abroad to 400 million in a year, beyond that, you will need the approval of the minister. If the bill says if you dare promote something that contradicts our national interests, and mind you, that phrase national interests is not defined in the bill, but if you dare champion something like that, that becomes a crime. That means now the only thing you are allowed to talk to and popularize in society is only that which the regime itself is engaging in and or has approved. So long story short, and this is where I had started from, people are making the mistake of, forgive me for a word that does not exist, we are making the mistake of academizing this discussion and this debate.
Making it academic.
We are becoming too academic by debating now. When you look at clauses, it is overly broad and blah, 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 so it's unconstitutional. That's not the point. The regime knows what it's doing. It will continue to do it. We have seen a scenario where a whole deputy speaker of parliament sat in a session, read the motion, debated himself, passed it himself. You think he did not know what he was doing? He knew what he was doing.
Which one was that?
The deputy.
It was the yes.
I've forgotten what it was.
And he got out with it. We have seen debates in parliament where the majority, when asked to say aye or nay, they say nay, and the speaker says the ayes have it. We will remember COVID. We were promised 100,000. Each vulnerable family was promised 100,000. The very first recipient of that money turned out to be a quack from northern Uganda. And if I recall, we even came to parliament and confessed. But that is the man the prime minister called and asked, Zifunya Sente. And he confirmed he was a quack. The regime promised us special beans, etc. during lockdown still, because we are not working. That food came for the few that it came to. It came after lockdown. That's the regime you think is concerned so much about you that when it's enacting legislation, it has your broader interests in mind. It does not have your interests in mind. Your interests do not matter. What matters to this regime is survival. Full stop.
Spectrum Extra on Radio 1 FM 90. We have heard from three panelists. We are going now to turn our attention to Major Retired Awich Pollar, who will give us the perspective. We know the NRM Secretariat came up with a statement in which they supported this bill totally. Remember also this bill has already been supported by the NRM Parliamentary Caucus, meaning it could easily sail on the floor of the House. Stay tuned to Radio 1 FM 90, but keep your comments coming via the WhatsApp line 0703 090 090. We'll continue after this break. Well, thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum Extra live on Radio 1 FM 90. A special focus on the Protection of National Sovereignty Bill 2026, a bill that is before Parliament, a bill that has brought a lot of intense debate across the country. So many groups coming up. We've seen them in the East, in the West, in the North, even here in the center, and a number of institutions stepping up, including institutions of higher learning. They have all taken memoranda to Parliament, and the committee has started inviting individuals and groups to actually submit their views to that committee. And we know very well that the Speaker of Parliament has indicated this is one of the businesses that must be handled before the next Parliament is sworn in. So, like it or not, it will be passed by this particular Parliament. I have a panel of four sharing their thoughts, but also giving positions from their different groupings. Dr. Anthony Obuku Ekwaro, physician and health sector policy specialist. He presented the position of the medical profession. Mr. Simon Ssenyonga, lawyer and director, International Center for Religious Advocacy and Development, presented the position of the religious institutions. Mr. Marvin Saasi, Secretary for Diaspora Affairs and member of the National Unity Platform Party, is also a member of their legal team, presented the position of the National Unity Platform Party. Now we want to hear from retired Major Pollar Awich. He's a Director of External Affairs at the NRM Secretariat. He's a lawyer and a human rights defender. Major Awich, your take on this bill. We know your political party, through its Secretariat, has already backed this particular bill. The NRM caucus also did the same, and they're the majority in the House. Can you somehow help us to understand the rationale behind this particular bill and whether it can be, considered and withdrawn as some stakeholders, or improved like some stakeholders are actually demanding.
Yeah, thank you so much. It is true we have the majority in Parliament, for which we are so proud about, because this reflects the will of the masses, that the people, majority of the people want our party, and that's why our flag bearers were elected in big numbers. And therefore, automatically, it gives us leverage and a chance to execute our manifesto, because our manifesto is the social contract we had with the people, but also in specific terms about legislations. Now, to tackle this topic, we need also to address our mind about what is the law. A law is defined as a superstructural institution in society which ideally is supposed to oil a society. A law, if there's a bad law, society will be stagnant. And even if a state wanted to pass it, or even if the government passed it, a good law is supposed to oil society. A good law is supposed to promote cohesion. A good law is supposed to promote harmony. A good law is supposed to promote production, real production of goods and services. Now, a law which does not do that, the society will be stagnant. And even the government or the proposer of the law itself, sooner or later, will amend it. Now, knowing that NRM acts in good faith, not like what my learned brother said, we are cognizant and alive to this fact, and that is what the law is, and that is what we stand for. Therefore, we cannot go ahead and pass a law which will make a society stagnant, no production, no cohesion, no harmony in society. Society is just difficult or hard to live in. We can't do that. Now, it is also true that many governments have passed it, many Australia and all this and all that, and maybe we have not gone to the specifics, but it has been done. Now, as opposed to the spirit, as my other friends have said, the purpose of there are two main purposes of this law, which is reflected in the object of the bill. One is transparency. There is no prohibition of bringing money. It doesn't say you are prohibited from bringing money. The simple and fair part of it is that bring money, but let it be known. It's just transparency, just disclosure. The law is not saying don't bring money. The law is saying bring money, but transparency. If at some point, for example, the country finds that there is an issue of determining how much I have, then that can be debated. My friend says don't give the benefit of the doubt, but we all know we need money, the law for the people. So the gist of this matter of the law is the transparency. Say where the money is coming from and what it's going to do. The other object of this law is that you have known lately that big powers have tended to influence countries. For example, there was a so-called riot in Iran. America had put in money there to buy the so-called riot. The riot, America later on turns around and said Iranian government suppressed at lots of cost of life, which is not proven. But they push money. Even in Venezuela, before the president was captured, they pushed lots of money to buy the generals, to buy the what, to buy the security, to buy everybody. So one of the objects of this law is that consistently international practice is showing strong forces, strong governments using money to not only influence activities, but simply buy people. And this money has been shown in many governments. Many governments. They buy off your officers, they buy off this, they do that. So the sovereignty bill is meant to say, if governments can identify that unlawful sources of money, which if you want to declare, if for example you're a general in the army and America is going to buy you, definitely you will find it difficult to disclose that source of money. You will not. And therefore, by you fearing to disclose the source of money and you can't get it, the country is saved. So two things. One, there is no prohibition of not bringing money. It's about transparency. Two, there is a real threat of strong governments buying countries, even buying ordinary citizens. It has happened in Iran. It led to that so-called riot. They have bought even generals where they captured the president.
Venezuela.
Even in Iraq, before the Iraq war, many generals were bought. Unfortunately, for those who accepted the money, the story is that when they went to America, the Israeli intelligence still followed them and killed them. So those generals, that's why you see the Iranian generals are saying, no, we have known that president before. You're not going to tell us to negotiate or do what? Because money exchanges hands. Now, if you had that provision of regulating or even disclosure of this money, that is it. So, without speculating and imagining and guessing the intention of the government and saying it is targeting at disabling some political actors, like in this case about the money which NUP failed to get. I said failed to get because the law was simply saying join iPod, get your money. NUP said no, we aren't going to sign up for iPod, and that is how they lost the money. It was not that NUP were being prohibited from getting money from Election Commission. It was kind of their option. They didn't like it because that was what the law said. Now, if you now start to speculate the thinking of government, and yet the thinking of government is captured in black and white in the object of the law. My learned friends here know for every legislation that comes, the object is stated in the first paragraph, the object of the law. Now you leave the object of the law and you start to imagine what the object of the law is. That is pure speculation. The object is transparency to prohibit money that can be used to buy people, either to buy them for riot like in Iran, or to buy them in the course of a war like in Iraq where generals were bought, or to buy even the bodyguards of the president of Venezuela to sell a president. That is it. Now, there could be gaps. This is a drafting stage. There could be gaps in this law, whether in the level of definition or otherwise, that can be addressed. My friend here says, don't go there because you are going to give the benefits of doubt to this government, which is, according to him, we have tried to give them the benefit of the doubt and people didn't benefit. That is the essence of legislation. General Assembly is a General Assembly. We can't have 50 million Ugandans in Parliament. The representatives there is an assembly of the people representing the people of Uganda. If the legislators or the majority see otherwise, then be it. Remember, as I started earlier, is that any law that does not bring harmony, any law that does not bring production in society, any law that oil the society to make a society oiling, it will be stuck. And of course, my lawyers here know that the case of a Bingira is right in our mind. So everybody is expected to make law in good faith. I also hear the talk of a condescending drafting provision. How I wish it was stated, I clearly or quoted how a law can be condescending. Because a law is a standalone thing. Condescension or condescending, we know, is talking when somebody's down, talking when looking at somebody down. So I have yet to see how this law talks when it's looking at you down there in a condescending attitude. Not at all. So, this law should be looked at in terms of its expressed, not implied objective. All right. And implied is a speculation and imagination of somebody.
All right. Before I take it back to the other people here in studio, how about the argument that what you have stated can actually be handled by the already existing laws? There's an NGO Act that handles issues to do with transparency with the NGOs. There's Financial Intelligence Authority, which also has the law. We have also the law on anti-money laundering law and a host of other laws that handle such issues. Are they not sufficient? Do you have to come up?
You see, in legislative process, if you want to cure a mischief, you can actually implement a provision.
So what is the mischief?
If you want, the mischief is what I've told you. Lack of transparency.
Okay.
2, foreign money used to buy people.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
So in legislation, when you have a mischief that you want to cure, you can first bring a new law if there's no law. But if there's an old law, you can implement it. But also you can strengthen it. There are some laws which are not strong enough. In any case, in this drafting, I am very sure there will be at the bottom of the law what you call cross-reference. Cross-reference means we are putting this law, but we are alive to the fact that there are other provisions.
So they can be interpreted together.
Yeah, you can make a cross-reference. At the bottom of that law, at the bottom of every law, it says there's cross-reference to this. So it does not do any harm if an authority, like in this case the government, still feels that with that standing law, we have still no... For example, the laws that you are saying, where has there been a disclosure?
All right. Another thing, political parties are legally registered entities. Saasi there talks about your intention to cripple the NUP by locking out the funding it's receiving. It's the same issue that Ssenyonga here has highlighted. You probably want to target religious institutions that are receiving funds that support different projects, which are also under the right to, to freedom. Dr. Ekwaro also talked about the issue of funding that comes to the health sector. Will you allow some of these institutions to still gather the resources that they want? For instance, NUP, for its legitimate purpose of mobilizing, for support.
That's what I said. I said anybody who is imputing the intention of this law outside the object of the law, which is stated in the opening page of the law, is speculation. And I don't know whatever intention they have.
So they are
but
speculating.
What I'm saying is that the law is not prohibiting bringing money. So if a hospital is there, like Dr. Ekwaro is saying, if a church is there and it gets its money, whoever is just saying, can you please declare this?
All right.
Okay? There's no prohibition. That if there was prohibition, there would be a provision saying, don't bring this. It would be clearly a prohibition and stated under the law.
All right. Let's go back to Dr. Ekwaro. Dr.
Yes.
Ekwaro, I want to begin with you for, in this phase of the rebuttal.
Yes.
Keep it short because we also have to bring in the view of the listener who is contributing to this discussion.
3 quick points. My first warning is to members of parliament. You remember the Public Order Management Act? The first victim was its champion, Right Honorable John Patrick Amama Mbabazi, the Super Minister, the would-be successor of President Museveni at that time, a very sober man, a very polished man. Supported the law. He was the first major victim. And there are others. We, the MPs, I campaigned. I'm not an MP, but I campaigned. We were doing medical camps. These drugs are coming, okay? These donations are coming. We are repairing boreholes. We get approval from Medical and Dental Practitioners Council. That is a transparent process. There is no doctor who can come from abroad without registering anywhere. Medical and Dental Practitioners Council. Okay? Now, I think on top of it, the person must go to Ministry of Internal Affairs, which they already do because sometimes they have to get what?
A permit.
A working permit. And they are scrutinized. So, the aspect of transparency, my big brother from Lango, Major Awich Pollar, I think it should be the other way around. If we are talking about true sovereignty, why are we not transparent about government leaders or non-government leaders with access to our taxes and sending them abroad? These are the ones selling our sovereignty, capital flight.
What do you mean sending them abroad?
Sending our money, our taxes, they have stolen abroad. Let us be transparent. Which Pollar sent 1 billion to New York to do what? Isn't it?
You're just using him as
Kennedy,
an example.
as an example. Kenneth Lukwago has sent 3 billion to Dubai. To do what? Where does he work? Where is he getting the money? This is the true sovereignty to retain our capital flight here. The second point I would like to talk about is the contradictions of this law. Okay? The first contradiction is obvious. A full attorney general who is supposed to be the champion of freedom, the champion of the law, is quoting the worst countries in terms of freedom, in terms of democracy. There's something called the Freedom House Index. They publish the Freedom Report every year. Russia, which is quoting, has a score of 13 out of 100. 13%, this is where the man is taking us. Nicaragua, 13%. Rwanda, 25%. He's quoting USA, 83%, but we know that one is not true. Because in US, if you talk about Russia, you are inside. So even in terms of democracy, US is doing badly, apart from maybe electoral democracy. But in terms of freedom, no. This proposal by the Attorney General is by the way contradicting the 4 principles of the NRM, which you know. The first one is democracy. I don't need to go far. Freedom of choice. The second one is patriotism. Patriotism, we are supposed to defend the Constitution. It is contradicting Article 1. The third one is Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism means we must interrelate with the foreigners. How are we going to establish a political federation, the East African Community, if Kenyans cannot comment on our politics and we can't comment on theirs? And we are hoping that by some magic we are going to become what? A political federation. Socio-economic transformation, how is it going to happen? Government can bring a PDM, but non-state actors also bring in money. And it has been transparent through the NGO processes. They can even deny you what? They have closed Chapter 4. They have closed what? They have closed. Were they not transparent? Were they not giving audit reports? Were they not submitting their accounts for inspection? Then finally, point number C. This sovereignty we are talking about is perhaps political sovereignty. We should be talking about economic sovereignty. We chased all these traders from the streets. Are we truly economically sovereign? Where are they going? We should be talking about social services sovereignty. Are we able to fund our health sector budget, our education budget, our food security? These are the things I think we should disturb this parliament. We should disturb the speaker. Other than making political calculations, I think, for the transition. This is how I see it as a Ugandan.
All right. Mr. Ssenyonga, your quick rebuttal and also comments on some of the issues that your colleagues around the table have been able to put across. Do you agree with them, don't you? Or you have any other new things to add on?
Let me just begin with what Dr. Obuku has mentioned here. The question of economic sovereignty. In the year 2021, the theme of the national budget was recapitalization of the Ugandan economy. As a matter of fact, because we're handling a pandemic, Uganda, through the Uganda Development Bank, got a recapitalization grant of about 868 million US dollars. Basically, it was gotten from African Development Bank, IMF, and World Bank. The purpose of that was to reboost the economy, specifically targeting those who are indigent and especially the youth groups. When the money was gotten, it went into the first beneficiary of the money. Guess who it was? The Akamwesi. Was he the vulnerable one? When you talk about economics, we began surrendering our sovereignty not at the point of the enactment of or the making of this law, but at the point when in the time of crisis, we could not be dependable, we could not be trustworthy.
All right. I must say that we have no record on this table to show that Akamwesi was constructed as a proceed of.
As a matter of fact, I want to go on record.
Bailout.
I want to go on record on that. Just to go and look for the report released by the by the Initiative for Social and Economic Rights. It is called ISA. It is called Where Did the COVID Money Go? And that reference and detail is there. Number 2, my older brother, retired Major Awich Pollar, talked about condescending language and how he doesn't see the condescending language. Article 9 of the Constitution talks about the right to your citizenship. No man can take away. You are a citizen under different circumstances, but one of those is citizenship by birth. Now, what is the law saying? It is reclassifying and redefining what citizenship is. And it is telling you, as long as you are a Ugandan, outside Uganda, you are a foreigner. What more attitude of condescending perspective do you want more than that, which strips me of my citizenship by birth? Two more points out, and I conclude. Number 1, we have failed to define. Today, I was appearing before the Joint Committee of Parliamentary Legal Affairs and Defense, and one of the points that came out strongly is that we have failed to define what national interests are. Major Awich Pollar talks about the object of the law, which is specifically to protect national interests. But I want to refer you to 2 clauses of the law. Objective 28 of the National Objectives and Directive Principles of State Policy, and which we know that as lawyers, under Article 8A of the Constitution, was given full credence. Under those objectives, there is no clear definition of what national interests are. What the law is saying is that the Ministry of Internal Affairs will sit back under their department and say, we think these are national interests. As Marvin said, most of it is riding on the whims of the current regime. But can we begin by defining that process of what do you mean that you want to protect national interests? Should we merely assume them? Should we merely look at the NRM agenda and we say these are the representative national objectives? Where does it leave the 85% of the population that I talked about, which has its anchor in faith, religion, and worship? How do you articulate those views when you're actually at a direct affront against their freedom of worship? Finally, it is very important for us to strongly consider that their what Major Awich talked about, transparency. He's saying, no, we are not refusing money, but be transparent. As a matter of fact, there are various laws that my land colleague knows. For example, under the NGO Act, NGOs, for example, those associated with religious institutions, even broadly across the board, there is an NGO bureau where there must be disclosure of certain details. You can't talk about transparency under this law where you're asking for intrusive information that violates the data protection laws in this country. You can't talk about transparency when you're violating and curtailing the very liberties of financial institutions. Talked about the Financial Institutions Act, talked about the Financial Intelligence Authority, talked about the Bank of Uganda Act. All of these give clear processes that when money comes in, basic knowledge in terms of operational, for example, NGOs, when money comes in, there is a whole declaration process that you go through. Now you're creating a parallel structure. I liked one of the points that was made. We are just coming out of the RAPEX process. Under the RAPEX process, you're talking about the reduction of departments and the maximum, you're talking about fiscal discipline. Right now what you're creating is a new department of peace and security with extensive powers, undefined, no parameters, and yet you're talking about a success of a RAPEX process. So the government is self-defeating in its own work. And that is why for us we're saying that these kind of steps are going to affect fundamentally the execution of key human rights, for example, the freedom of worship. That's a concern that we have. But guess what, Anderson? If this law passed today, I can't make such a statement. Because there is a clause, this is clause 13, the offense of economic sabotage. Because now I will be speaking about something which the government will deem as dangerous.
Where will you be speaking from?
That's if they haven't yet arrested you, the investigators who hosted me, or closed down your platform. Because the government is having all that power. They will simply tell you, we can't renew your certificate of registration. After 3 months, we shall not even get back to you. Now, that's a very dangerous thing for the freedom of worship, association, and expression.
All right, Spectrum X on Radio 1 FM 90. Keep your comments coming by the WhatsApp line 0703-090-090. Tell us what you think about the protection of national sovereignty bill now that is before Parliament, and views are being gathered. You never know, the committees that are handling this issue might hear from you via this particular platform and take on board some of your comments. I have a panel of 4. We are looking at what this bill means for this particular country, and we have heard from the both sides. There's a bad side, but also there's the other side, which is represented by, Major Awich, Pollar, who actually says this bill is intentional and has good things that we should not throw away entirely. And also the other side who think this bill is not required, including another argument that there are sufficient laws that can do exactly, that are doing exactly what the government is using to try and justify this. We're going to go for a break. When we return, we'll hear from Marvin Saasi from the National Unity Platform Party to make his rebuttal, and then we'll sample some of your views that you've sent via the WhatsApp line 0703-090. Stay tuned to Radio 1 FM 90 because Spectrum Xtra continues after this break. We're glad that you're still with us on Spectrum Extra, live on Radio 1 FM 90, 2 hours dedicated on analyzing the protection of national sovereignty bill. I have 4 representatives of the different groups here in studio. Retired Major Pollar Awich, Director of External Affairs, NRM Secretariat, lawyer and human rights defender. We have Mr. Simon Ssenyonga, lawyer and Director, International Center for Religious Advocacy and Development. Dr. Obuku Ekwaro, physician and health sector policy specialist.
Thank you very much.
And right now we want to welcome on the mic,
for
Mr.
not using Anthony.
Marvin Saasi, Secretary for Diaspora Affairs and member of the National Unity Platform legal team. Saasi, you've heard from your colleagues around the table, including retired Major Pollar, who chose to directly respond to some of the issues that you put across, and he seems to suggest that, if I can remember the word he used, actually says, let me say maybe something they commonly use in law, fishing expedition. You know, when you're trying to find excuses left, right, and center that don't add up. That's what he seems to suggest.
Yeah.
Let's hear your quick response to his submission.
So, retired Major Awich Pollar was earlier talking about the objectives of the bill. In the language of the bill, actually, the bill says that its primary objective is to protect the sovereignty of Uganda and its people. But in close relation to my initial submission, the duty for the rest of us Ugandans who are likely to bear the brunt of this law is to read between the lines. And this is what you will find. Number one, the actual objective is not to protect the sovereignty of Ugandans. The objective of the bill is to protect the sovereignty of the regime from the citizens. That's number one. Number two, the bill is legislating or putting in writing what we the citizens already know and have been saying, but we have been refusing to accept. That's why I also mentioned continuing to give this regime the benefit of the doubt that it does not deserve. The regime has demonstrated in word and deed over and over again that for them it's like they are they are like tourists in this country. Nobody has treated us like foreigners more than the regime. That's why you will find that even when your roads here are wanting, your hospitals are wanting, public schools are wanting, the regime will spend billions of shillings to go and construct roads in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Remember, they're accusing us of being foreigners. I think we've all perhaps had the benefit of traveling and going outside Uganda. And one of the lessons you'll live with when you return from whichever country you have gone to is that the rulers in this country called Uganda actually hate the citizens.
That's not possible.
The son of
That's
the
not possible.
head of the... Well, it is what it is. The son of the head of regime keeps telling you that maybe there are two people sections of people who matter. The Bachwezi and then whoever else he adds into the mix. So the rest of you really are maybe necessary inconveniences. So from the regime's own conduct, you've not just become foreigners. You've always been foreigners who do not matter. Your interests are secondary to the interests of the regime. Of course, you can continue pretending and looking the other side, but the lesson will keep recurring over and over and over. And perhaps maybe contestation as a word might not bring out very much what I want, although it was said. But there is an element of taking us for fools and manipulating our or attempt to, or maybe gaslighting us. That you are accusing Ugandans of being in cahoots with foreigners, but around 50% of Uganda's recurrent budget is funded by people you call foreigners. If it was not for international bodies like the IMF and the World Bank towards the end of the 20th century, I don't think the NRM regime would be boasting about the economy as much as it's doing.
And the government has explained that those are lawful sources of funds.
That's why I said that the regime really is out to protect its sovereignty. And what I really meant was the regime is looking out for its own interests, and the interests of the rest of us are secondary if they matter at all.
When the government gets the money from IMF, World Bank, and all these other institutions, it's for investments, projects. I'm sure you've worked on some of the roads.
Allegedly.
You've driven on some of these roads.
Allegedly.
You've gotten some services as a result of these loans.
Yeah,
and
I keep saying that that whatever achievements the regime boasts about are achievements that any other government would have realized. Like, you cannot keep boasting about achieving the very bare minimum, because society cannot stagnate. Uganda of 1980, like Uganda cannot remain perpetually in 1981 1st May. It has to keep progressing, no matter how painfully and no matter how slowly that progress happens. So this whole thing of characterizing everyone that the regime thinks is a threat to its existence as a foreigner, and then seeking to stigmatize whoever deals with them, is not something I would find to be beneath the regime. So I want to go back to what I was saying about the population.
Very quickly.
That the truth of the matter is that this population has been on its own for a long time. But those who are not maybe so much politically active always tend to think that those opposition problems, they will deal with them. Kastami, I'm not in politics. Kastami, I'm not abusing Mr. Museveni like they keep accusing the opposition. Me, I'm safe. But this bill is showing you everyone is going to pay price. You will pay price for silence. You will pay price for talking. You will pay price just for the sake that you are Ugandan staying in this mess. At the end of the day, in a ship, in a sinking boat, nobody is safe. It doesn't matter whether you were helping to steer the ship or what. We all drown. And this bill is demonstrating that even those who thought they are far removed from the mess that Uganda is, they are now being witnesses to the road that we have been speaking about for a long time. Now, the option is up to the citizens.
All right.
They can. Thank you.
All right, Pollar, please, if you can come in very quickly in a few minutes, your closing remarks here, because we need to get some comments from the listener. Or if you're willing to wait, I can read out the comments and then you can submit as you respond to some of these issues. Thank you so much. Now, we've been hearing from the listeners via the WhatsApp line 0703, sharing their thoughts about this discussion, and we want now to get their comments so that we can understand their take on this particular bill. A number of comments have already come in on the WhatsApp line 0703 090 090. Please feel free to continue sharing your thoughts, and I'll be reading them out. One writer defined a law as an ordinance of reason for common good. That's Thomas More. The Sovereignty Bill falls short of these two. It is not responsible and is not for the common good. It is only government that needs it to consolidate power. However, the Tekele versus Adams case in Zimbabwe and the Public Order Management Bill should be a guide to our legislators at the hand of this bill. Soon or later, it will catch up with them. That's a comment that comes in from Lawrence, who is listening in from Zigoti. We have another comment that comes in from Susan, who says, do we need this kind of bill that is reflecting badly on our country? How come other African countries have not come up with such bills, yet they continue to enjoy fruits from foreigners, including those that finance their political activity? Samson writes in and says, Parliament should not consider this bill. They should shelve it because the people behind it are not meaning well for this particular country. We have a comment that comes in from Eric, who is listening in from Arua, who says, government should focus on providing services to the citizen, not coming up with laws that are aiming at closing the voices of the people. Then we have this comment that comes in from Eric, who is listening in from Entebbe. He says, the government is right. Some people have been planning to destroy our country, and they are using funding that comes in from abroad. Let's first take those ones. Very quick responses. I want to begin with you, Dr. Ekwaro, if you can respond to those particular comments very quickly, and then we'll go around the table.
Yeah, my response is to welcome those remarks, but also say this. We live in a global world. We cannot avoid foreign influence, including funding. The second point is sidelining or blocking the mainstream political class brought in the ghetto to the political center. This is something when they were pushing away Mbabazi, they were pushing away Kizza Besigye and others. They brought in the unexpected ghetto, a political class, which is now really demanding what the people need. I would call this anti-sovereignty bill. And once you exhaust all avenues of freedom of expression, including economically, let us hope we don't deteriorate to invite an armed struggle by the people. Happy birthday, Dr. Kizza Besigye, and belated happy birthday to His Highness the Kabaka.
Opposition has been caught pants down. They are panicking if you outsource funds to change government. What is that called? We know NUP has always done rhetoric. Do they want to fund ADF to show that they need the regulations? Sovereignty bill is overdue, and Uganda needs order. That's a comment that comes in from Stan. Mawa Amaza, listening in from Moyo. Good evening, fellow citizens. NRM isn't a trusted party for Ugandans. Expecting anything from NRM is just like trusting a cat to take care of a rat. Jiga Samuel Mary, listening from Namlondo Zone in Boyogere, says, thanks for the show. Sincerely speaking, the bill is targeting opposition, civil society, religious institutions. It's not in good heart for Uganda. It's going to cripple our economy. Enough is enough. Let the NRM government leave our Uganda such that Ugandans enjoy their inherent rights. Louis Kizito writes in, says, I just have two questions for my senior OB, Awich Pollar. Do you honestly think that if the American and British MI16 intelligence agencies wanted to execute a successful influence operation here, they would fail because of the proposed sovereignty law that threatens their foreign assets and intelligence handlers? Matters of sovereignty go beyond mere words in a badly crafted legislation. Work on the real underlying political issues that will make those Ugandan generals like American philanthropists money. I don't think you understand the plumbing of the global financial architecture. Secondly, have you heard of things like cryptocurrencies and other highly liquid DLT financial instruments that make people their own banks without relying on mainstream financial systems? I will leave these questions for you to answer. You are making the adoption of cryptocurrencies among us operate Ugandans much easier by passing these laws. Ssenyonga has very good arguments. That's a comment from Louis Kizito, a lawyer who is listening to this discussion. We have another comment, Spectrum Xtra, two things. Can Mr. Awich tell us that the countries they are quoting, are they the best as are the best Uganda as a country would like to emulate? Two, are the interests of the regime the same as the interests of a country? Because in this case, regime preservation versus what is good for Uganda. That is Robert, who is listening in from Kumi. Joshua, listening in from Namungona, writes and said, what aspects of sovereignty bill would Mr. Awich change if he had the opportunity to do so? Kamoko Fred Keita, listening in from Kira Municipality, writes in and says, good evening, Spectrum Xtra. Thank you for the show. My comments, whereas the framers of the bill could have had good intentions protecting the security of citizens, it's a mean bill, essentially, when it dubs its citizens living outside Uganda as foreigners. Two, the government seems to be in a panic mode. There are NGO board and Financial Intelligence Authority in place to regulate the NGO activities and their financial dealings respectively. Why then seek for this law, which to me is a mere duplication of functions, wasting taxpayers' money in terms of enforcement and administration? Three, we have witnessed a bigger percentage of the national budget being foreign funded. They would, in the same vein, support the citizens to bring in more money as long as they are able to control and regulate, unless they are, in other words, saying they aren't in charge. My opinion, it will purely be a bad law if left the way it is. Good evening, Spectrum Xtra. Dennis listening in from Kalere. My question to the NRM person defending the law. The transparency is talking about with regard to finances. How come the NRM is drinking wine and preaching water? Why their president donates taxpayers' money at will using the so-called classified budget? How can he defend it? I thought all money from outside passes through the banks, which are tracked by the Financial Intelligence Authority. What more transparency does he want? Kauma Digo, listening in from Mitiana. Good evening, Spectrum. After NRM failing to fulfill its responsibility to citizens, it has resorted to bringing that bill purposely to shield itself from accounting to the public. Above all, believe me and Paula, it will sail through despite its undemocratic tendencies. Well, let's begin with these responses, and I want to come to you, Awich Pollar, very quickly before we take in more comments.
So many, but let me try.
You can respond to those where they're calling you out.
Now,
Because some people want you, for instance, to...
one of them is, what would I change if I was given the chance?
Yeah.
Hearing the feelings and the sentiments of the people, one thing I would change would be procedural. And of course, this would be in consonance with the procedure of Parliament, in that I would do more consultation, because the feeling is that it is being hurried. I would definitely change that, we get more views as much as possible, so that we are not seen to have done it in a hurry. The other thing I would do is that it seems in the drafting people are worried about, say, definition of national interest. Oh, you can do this by giving exceptions that national interest will not include this. Then you list it where you feel that there would be abuse of such a provision. You said you can leave national interest as it is, and then you give exceptions in the drafting that national interest shall not be taken to mean 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It may not be exhausted, but you can bring out the mischief that you fear. So part of what I would do is to make a more acceptable drafting, but maintaining the objective of the law. So I'm saying what I would do is, 1, procedural, give more listenings to people, and 2, draft it properly, which takes care of the concern of the people. From my OB, when I hear OB, I get it that is from military school. I greet him so much, that OB from military school. I am saying that his question is whether passing this law would stop the American or British intelligence if they wanted. Well, you can never be sure, but what you envisage, the mischief that you see, you deal with it. The rest that you can't, you leave it there. I mean, even if you close the gap, some would go for military confrontation. But what we can see, what is foreseeable as a state or as a people or a government, we can do it. The rest that we are not foreseeable, we leave it. What more transparency? Now, this issue of transparency, I find the argument contradictory even around this table, because my friends here are saying already there's transparency in NGO, in what, and all this anti-money laundering, and they seem to be okay with it, but they're not okay with it here. If you are saying in the anti-money laundering there's already transparency, you are saying in the NGO Act there's already transparency, and you're already okay with it, what is wrong with having it here? It could be taken like a consolidation, but as I said earlier, cross-referencing would be made. So I do not see a logic in saying, yes, transparency is in the other laws, why have it here? But you're already okay with transparency elsewhere. Why are you against it here? So, that is it. But also, the other thing is that, and that goes to the same transparency that is accepted in other provisions but opposed in this provision. It means, therefore, that if these acts and activities are ongoing, even if it was not under the law, putting it down in writing or composing it in a law is what you call codification. Codification means it has been there, but you're now putting it in writing. The same thing with national interest. As I said, if national interest is put as a block, as enclosed, drafted by, proposed drafting by way of exceptions, that national interest would not be taken to do this, to do the following. In that case, you're avoiding abuse. Now, there is still, my learned young brother here still insisted on reading between the lines. He is saying, while you read the law as it is, you read between the lines. That's what I referred to counsel as speculation. You're seeing the line, and you're saying read between the lines. What is between the line? Avoid speculation. See what is in black and white, and or tackle it as such. Tackling as such. So this envelope thinking of you are reading between the lines is a polite way of speculating.
But that is the essence of politics.
You know?
Deception.
Okay.
Then there's the issue of taking things for granted, that those are things that should happen and NRM should not boast about it. I had it in Sheraton. Before I came here, I had a high-level discussion in Sheraton, and people made that statement. I said, really? For example, by the time Chaka Chaka was singing, I'm in love with Mr. DJ, already FM stations were in some parts of the world, like in South Africa. But for some government position here, it wasn't there. You know that by that time, the government stuck to one TV, one radio, such that if you wanted to overthrow a government, you'd go to that radio station. So, do you not credit a government that did that at that time when other governments had it? And then you said, oh, because FM is there. It is not true that all governments have that, even in North Korea. So why wouldn't you say that government positions that are brought, even if by nature of adopting to technology, not all government adopt it at the same time. Even the kind of freedom of currency. It's not correct
Russia,
to give appreciation to a government position which has taken, and you take it for granted. No.
All right. Those are authoritarian regimes.
Let's hear from you. Your quick response.
Those are authoritarian regimes. You cannot be one.
If this
you
one
cannot
is not
aspire to.
authoritarian.
No, listen. You cannot aspire to go the Russia way. You cannot aspire to go Nicaragua way. Okay? And I'm afraid the Rwanda way. We are supposed to move towards the more free countries, because after all, we are liberalizing our economy. This is what I'd like to say. But my final warning, let me hope this law will not catch Kiriaki Wanuka, the Attorney General, or Norbert Mao, because they are pushing this, like JPAM did, and others before them. And tomorrow, you never know. Only Allah knows what is there tomorrow. Happy birthday, Dr. Kizavesti.
Right, let's hear from Saasi.
If I can speak about the two commenters who mentioned and stated that President Chagulanyi and the National Unity Platform has been receiving money from foreigners to overthrow the regime, blah, blah, blah. That is a lie that the regime has sustained for a long time. But I think if our collective memory can come to our aid, the regime has not successfully prosecuted a single person claiming that this one, we found him with this amount of money, he got it from this and this foreigner, and he was intending to do this. Even the Dr. Wesige, whom they abducted from Kenya, carted him off into Uganda and threw into the coolers, claiming they had overwhelming evidence against him, will be making, like what, 3 years, 2 years in prison?
They celebrated the 69th and 70th birthday.
Prison.
So
the regime, that line of the opposition gets money from foreigners, blah, 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 that's a tired line. But I understand where they are coming from, because if you cannot justify what you are doing, you have to find some fishy excuse to justify it. And when you're not acting in good faith, you simply cannot have a coherent explanation for your actions.
All right, very quickly, let's hear from you, your closing remarks on this particular issue, Mr. Ssenyonga.
I think for me, at the end of the day, when the politics is done, when the law is done, we are going to remain Ugandans. We have a nation to protect. We have a nation to live in. Let everybody make the others' life and existence very comfortable. That at no point should we look back and we think that the regime that many had hope in, or many still have hope in, has actually forsaken many. And that is why, for me, I re-echo that the motto of our nation is for God and my country. And anything that attempts to overthrow the sovereignty of God by creating a new sovereign in the sense of government is the first enemy of the country. And indeed, like...
but God also recognizes governments. Actually, we are told that God chooses the leaders that we have.
You see, it is God who initiates, and that's why I'm saying that the one who was initiated into the process should not be the one to overthrow the initiator. And that is why the sovereignty of the nation begins with the upholding of the godly values, and in essence, the freedom of worship. That is why I strongly say that at the earliest stage possible, this law should be thrown out without even looking back, without even any form of anticipation. No one should make us assume that the constitutional provisions are not deeply entrenched enough to explain what sovereignty is.
All right. More comments that are coming in. Patrick Aroma, rising from Lira City. What sovereignty are we talking about? Uganda itself is not a sovereign. Foreigners and foreign powers control everything in Uganda. Ugandans have been disempowered economically and all left with hot hair, political power. The bill is diversionary and a waste of time. Then we have another comment from Abima Jimmy, listening in from Mukono. Good evening, Spectrum Extra. I don't know why we are still surprised. Dictators will do anything. I think he says dictators will do anything to oppress opposition. They are going to pass this bill. People like Attorney General and Speaker have ever done whatever it takes to pass laws in favor of the NRM government. So would rest be assured they are going to pass this bill and President will sign it. Only be God to save us from this. That's Abima Jimmy listening in from Mukono. Edison, listening in from Kampala, says, good evening, Radio 1. The bill is necessary, especially as we exploit natural resources, expect saboteurs. We can discuss the merits and demerits of some clauses and have a position. Then lastly, but not least, everyone is going to cry. Unemployment, poverty, etc. The reason why our country has more lunatics than any other country in the whole world. I don't know whether that's true that we have lunatics than any other country.
The survey of mental health showed that we are having a very big proportion of mental illness. But I just wanted really to pass a warning to those who are pushing this bill. Let us hope it does not boomerang and come back, because you never know what happens.
All right, with that we come to the end of Spectrum Extra. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for sharing with us your thoughts. Next week we'll continue also looking at the views of other stakeholders who will have submitted them before Parliament. But from me and the team here in the studio, we want to wish you a fabulous weekend. Back to BB Jr., who is going to be doing great songs and great memories as he does the Soul Train shortly after the BBC News.